Hello, I am Goose. A couple of years ago, me and my little brother were window shopping at a Barnes & Noble. My kid brother was looking for JoJo manga, but I was looking for one of two things. A hidden gem to make a neat video about, or an absolutely ridiculous book to also make a video about. The one I found that I do want to talk about is called What the Font? A Manga Guide to Western Typeface. And I was not at all expecting this book to be as interesting as it is. What the Font was written and illustrated by Kunichi Ashiya and published by Seven Seas Entertainment in late 2020. The aforementioned company is responsible for such classics as Cutie Honey A Go-Go, Does It Count If You Lose Your Virginity to an Android, I Married My Best Friend to Shut My Parents Up, Our Dining Table, and Darling in the Franxx? I wasn't expecting that one. Color me surprised. Okay, I'll admit, even if they don't have as many heavy hitters as Shonen Jump, they certainly have a lot of manga under their control. It's pretty impressive, and some of the stuff is actually moderately popular, like Plus Size Elf, To Love Ru, Toradora, and Darling in the Franxx, as stated earlier. And also, What the Font. So how about I stop talking about all this publishing nonsense and actually discuss the book? Well, to summarize this whole video, What the Font is, essentially, an edutainment textbook. Imagine this. Case file, Marusu, sales representative at a small production company. Doesn't matter where. She's suddenly been placed into the head designer position to help create logos for companies. However, she doesn't know a thing about typefaces, margins, or any of that fancy schmancy font jargon. So, out of nowhere, she starts seeing, wouldn't you know it, anthropomorphized fonts. What luck! I would have gone with personified fonts, since they're drawn as actual people, but that's the word they use on the back of the book. Anyways, Marusu keeps seeing visions of these font folk as they take her to what they call the Typeface Research Society. Setting aside the plot for a second, let's talk about the educational aspect of What the Font. Despite being sold as a manga, I'd argue that this could be used to introduce younger people, or rookies, to typefaces. It may be tricky to notice, with how all the characters are simply just named after the fonts, and talk about themselves. There's much more to it than that. Through Marusu's journey through the TRS, she gets passed on from one font to the next, and each one reveals many unique details about the fonts. The amount of information that's been packed into this manga, while simultaneously being made engaging and fun to read, is actually pretty crazy. And that's mostly thanks to Ashiya making the fonts actually interesting characters. Now, we'll talk about those characters in a second, but I need to talk about the art in this book. Ashiya knocked it out of the park with the art in What the Font. The art isn't on berserk levels of detail, then again what is, but it still looks good. Despite being simple, there's a surprising amount of detail packed into these pages, which is helped by the fact that each page is split into 4 big old panels. Though it's not as much room as you might think. With plenty of room in the margins for trivia the fonts reference during their conversations, combined with the room the speech bubbles take up on the actual panels, it may seem like a claustrophobic amount of space for some artists, but Ashiya works with that space splendidly, and delivers some excellent art that's impressively detailed, like the characters' outfits for example, without clashing with the more simplistic elements of the art style, like the characters' faces. I mean, some of them don't even have noses, and that's okay. All of the character designs go hard. These fonts rock. Speaking of, let's talk about the fonts this book discusses and how they're portrayed in the book. Which we will get right into after this quick break. We'll be right back. The easy route would have been to make each font just wear a shirt or clothing item with the name of the font on it, and then they'd talk a page or two about the font they represent. But no, there's a lot more thought put into these font guys. Each one is representative of their font's respective history and usage, through things like their clothing, their way of speaking, and even how they interact with each other. For example, each font's outfit is influenced by both where they were created and the year they were created. All of the fonts in this book range anywhere from the year 2000 all the way back to 100 AD. Yeah, the year 100. And each one is stylized accordingly, from Garamon's 16th century French dress, to Bodoni's late 18th century Italian suit, and all the way to Ariel's more modern hoodie. Well, it was the 80s, but it's modern by the timeline standards. As for conveying their personalities, as well as how they interact with each other, I'm gonna have to spoil a tiny bit of the start of the book. Within the first section of the book, the sans serif font section, we meet Helvetica, Futura, Gil Sans, and Arial. Helvetica is something of a celebrity due to having such a widespread use throughout the world, but he's quite modest about it because he's not very flashy. He tries to be a mediator between the more overactive, flashy fonts. Futura is a perfectionist who tends to space out a lot, which is a not-so-subtle nod to the fact that Futura is the font that NASA used on the plaque they put on the moon. She's also good at getting people to do what she wants, which explains her use in the Supreme logo. Does that explain it? I don't know where I was going with that. She's a girl boss, just leave me alone. Anyways, Gil Sans is used in stuff like timetables, tickets, and railway writings, so he's introverted and professional. Prefers to be alone with his work, but doesn't mind some company once in a while. And finally, Arial is similar to Helvetica, like, really similar. So they tend to run into each other a lot and get confused for each other, which leaves Arial with a lack of self-confidence over the fact that he's not entirely original. And that's just 4 of the 25 fonts discussed in the book. Anyways, after 209 pages of meeting these font people, hanging out with them, and learning arguably too much about the fonts for the average person, Marusu ends up getting sent back to her world. You know what that means? She has to go back to work. At the end of the day, she ends up rocking her design job, making some banger logos, I guess. We don't really see any of them. And all thanks to the help of her journey through that weird font world. By the way, it's not even a it was all a dream situation. She doesn't doze off on her desk or in a library or something. She just pops back into her office after saying goodbye like magic. Kinda weird, but everything that prefaced it was weirder, so I'll give it a pass. Looking back at What the Font, what really surprised me about it is how much of this information I ended up retaining. A little bit of a behind-the-scenes thing here, but I do a lot of work in Google Docs and Google Sheets, so fonts are pretty important for making the information I put on the page easy to read and compact at the same time. So after I read through What the Font and went to my Google Docs for the usual stuff, like scripts and a timeline for my webcomic in progress, wasn't supposed to talk about that. I found myself remembering tidbits of Typeface info time and time again while I was working, just having all the stuff that I learned play back in my head, like different types of fonts and the difference between a font and a typeface, and I was like, what the hell? Why am I talking like the nerd emoji right now? It's impressive how a well-written, engaging, and educational book can make you actually retain the information you read. Isn't that something? Maybe school textbooks should take a page from What the Font. I don't mean make them manga, that would be ridiculous. Unless... Anyways, that's all I've got to say about What the Font. Buy it, read it, learn, lend it to your friends, hopefully they give it back, maybe not, I don't know your life. Quick roundup of the new fan art, by the way. You all know the drill by now. You make fan art, post it to my Discord server, and I'll put it in the next video at the end here. I'm not asking you to make new fan art, but, I mean, a lot of people will see it. And you get to leave your social media there too, so... people might follow you, I don't know. Also, I like getting fan art, it's very flattering. Still not used to the whole fan art thing, it's kind of new to me. I've been talking too long, I need to conclude this. By the way, this video was edited by my older brother Chandler, and he has his own YouTube channel, Frappe-chan. And I figured I'd shout him out since he went through the whole trouble of editing this thing for me. I'm also on his channel if you want to see me be funny in a Let's Play scenario. My name is Goose, and I hope you've enjoyed the video. Now go pet a dog. Go for a walk. Do something that makes you happy, as long as it's not murder. Bye!